Hello there. This is something that I feel very strongly about. Rubio defends Vance's Munich speech as CBS host suggests free speech caused the Holocaust. I'm sorry. What? What do you mean free speech caused the Holocaust? Can you explain? I mean, what exactly about the ability to speak your opinion do you think leads to genocide? Do you literally believe that people are evil, and if we allow them to freely listen to others and elect their own leaders based on what they think and not what the journalists gatekeep them to think, basically curtailing news that would convince you to be evil, and in this way making you good? This is an insane worldview that essentially makes you the average citizen, the taxpayer, the person who's supposed to be basically the customer of these media organizations, and essentially the sovereign is supposed to be the citizen, not the elected representative, who's basically there to represent you. Well, it makes you the worst part of this chain. The politician on the left, of course, is virtuous. The media is super virtuous. They are the gatekeepers of truth. And you are stupid and evil, and only by their interference can you be stopped from genociding people, apparently. So says the left. It's insane. I reject this wholeheartedly. So, Secretary of State Marco Rubio defended Vice President J.D. Vance's speech in Germany, slamming Europe's penchant for censorship on Sunday, which is fair enough because they are very censorious. Rubio clashed with CBS host Margaret Brennan on Face the Nation after she suggested that free speech had been weaponized to bring about the Holocaust in 1930 Germany. Brennan highlighted Vance's speech to the Munich Security Conference in Germany last week, which criticized European allies for adopting a Soviet-style approach to censorship. What did all of this accomplish other than irritating our allies, Brennan? Well, for example, you could say that it emboldens our actual allies, which are the ones that want free speech, telling them, hey, the US got your back, we support you, we're against what they're doing to you. No, we used to export freedom and democracy from the West, both the EU and the United States, to the rest of the world through both economic as well as social, entertainment and such means, even sometimes through guns, which didn't work, of course. But nowadays, suddenly, when we're talking about bringing free speech back to Europe, you shouldn't say it. It's going to just irritate our allies. What's the point? Did you ever say this when somebody told, other allies of the US, like the United Arab Emirates or Egypt or other, Arab countries, oil-rich countries that the US has all sorts of deals with, or any other countries that the US gives money to through US aid, for example? Was it fine to tell them to have more democracy? Well, if yes, and the answer it was yes, of course they would support it. Not only to tell them to have more democracy, but also told them to have more left-wing social movements like feminism and the Rainbow Crowd and all sorts. So now suddenly trying to export your values is wrong. Why? Because freedom of speech is something that is harmful to the left, because reality has a right-wing bias today, which is not hard because the left has gone off the handle. Like I said before, in order to be a right-winger today, all you have to do is take someone from the left, squarely in the left from like 20 years ago, bring him today, suddenly a far-right lunatic. Anyway, so the defense Rubio mounted was this: why would our allies or anybody be irritated by free speech and by someone giving their opinion? We are, after all, democracies. The Munich Security Conference is largely a conference of democracies in which one of the things that we cherish and value is the ability to speak freely and provide your opinions. Well, not anymore. The left has declared it open season free speech, and you can see in the United States as well, John Kerry was very against the existence of free speech. Hillary Clinton, the same, basically saying that we can't have democracy if we have free speech, which is ridiculous. What did she say? We lose total control? Good. You're not supposed to have total control. That's why it's a democracy and not a monarchy. Crazy. Anyway, to continue, he said, and so, I think if anyone's angry about his words, they don't have to agree with him, but to be angry about it, I think actually makes his point. Well, he was standing in a country where free speech was weaponized to conduct a genocide, Brennan replied. And that's literally insane. He met with the head of a political party that has far-right views and some historic ties to extreme groups. The context of that was changing the tone of it, and you know that. So she says basically that it's a party that's a fan of the Austrian painter, which is a complete lie. They're not. They have nothing in common in terms of policies with the Austrian painter. And also, the Austrian painter wasn't even right-wing, and I'm going to prove it in a moment. So, she's a total liar. Next. He says, well, I have to disagree with you. No, I have to disagree with you, Rubio said as the pair talked over one another. Free speech was not used to conduct a genocide. The genocide was conducted by an authoritarian 1930s German regime that happened to also be genocidal because they hated Jews, and they hated minorities, and they had a list of people they hated, but primarily the Jews. He added there was no free speech in Nazi Germany. There was none. There was also no opposition in that Germany. They were the sole and only party that governed that country, so that's not an accurate reflection of history. Rubio went on to reiterate Vance's point that the European leaders should be able to continue working with the US and other like-minded nations despite facing criticism, at which point Brennan ended the segment. Now, I'm going to talk about the criticism part for a moment. I asked Grok, did the EU ever criticize the lack of democracy in other countries? And apparently, yes, a lot. So both within the EU, where they even fine you, like countries like Hungary and Poland, if they don't do what the EU decides is democratic, despite the fact that the EU itself, European Union, is not democratic, these people are not elected. They're bureaucrats that are completely removed from even public scrutiny, let alone being held for elections. But they decide what the democracy in member states should look like, and if you disagree, you'll be fined. Of course, there's candidate countries like Turkey and the Western Balkans, like Serbia and Bosnia and Herzegovina. They face criticism for slow progress in democratic reforms, with concerns over corruption, media freedom, and judicial independence. Oh, sorry. So, media freedom. What does that mean? Media freedom. Does that mean free speech? Obviously not, because telling you that you don't have enough free speech angers you. So what it means is more left-wing talk on the mainstream media. Essentially, create a propaganda machine that supports us, and then you'll be allowed in. We'll let you in then. In international relations, they obviously address democratic deficits globally, like in Belarus, Hong Kong, and Myanmar. And in terms of general statements and policies, the EU often includes democracy promotion in its external action through initiatives like the European Instrument for Democracy and Human Rights, which supports civil societies and human rights defenders globally. Human rights like what? Exactly. The right to trans your kid? Not the right to freedom of speech, certainly. So this makes zero sense. Also, you had the people in the European Union at the highest levels saying outright that they wanted Joe Biden to win. So the whole "don't interfere in our affairs" speech that they had is completely hypocritical as well. Just pointing it out there. So let's talk for a moment about the 1930s Germans and how they are connected to the modern right wing. Not. That's the simple answer. Basically, freedom of speech in 1930s Germans, well, the world they created, they had the Enabling Act of 1933, which effectively allowed their leader to pass laws without the involvement of the Reichstag, the parliament essentially, leading to the suppression of free speech. Laws like the Reichstag Fire Decree suspended civil liberties, including freedom of speech and the press. Censorship. The regime implemented widespread censorship. Books that were considered un-German were burned. Mind you, they weren't taken from the libraries in kindergarten, where 6- and 5-year-olds would have to see your rainbow adult images. No, they were burned. You wouldn't be allowed to hold these, and if you were found to, you'd be punished. The idea that the right wing is book burning is so ridiculous. Saying you can't show that to my 5-year-old is not the same as banning your book. Anyway, media outlets were controlled or shut down if they didn't align with the German ideology, and only state-approved news could be published or broadcast. Speaking out against the government or its policies could lead to severe repercussions, including imprisonment in concentration camps, torture, or execution. Organizations like the Gestapo, the secret police, ensured that dissent was quickly and harshly dealt with. Now, who is against dissent against the government today? Oh, that's right, it's the left. It's constantly saying you can't dissent against the narrative. You can't talk against government agencies. If, for example, there's a health emergency and you say that the health services in your country are wrong, well, you are going to be censored, fined, banned, thrown out of your job, just have your life completely destroyed, because clearly dissent against the government is not allowed. And of course, you had propaganda. Instead of free speech, the Germans propagated a one-sided, state-controlled narrative through Joseph Goebbels' Ministry of Public Enlightenment and Propaganda, which managed all forms of media to promote their ideology. Now, if you remember, the EU and I believe Canada as well had basically ministries of truth as well. And also, if you look at the media narratives, basically apart from Fox News, which is not even that right-wing anymore, if you remember, they kicked Tucker Carlson out. Basically, the entire mainstream media is a one-sided, state-controlled narrative. They literally get paid by the state through things like USAID, and they do favors to the Democrats, both in terms of interviews, in terms of narrative. The coverage for Trump is like 99% negative in the press. So, I wonder, who do they resemble? And of course, they are also against public gatherings that are not in line with them, which is exactly what happened, if you remember, during the coup. We had a health emergency, and then you could congregate, for example, for Ruth Bader Ginsburg's funeral. You could congregate for Black Lives Matter's rallies and riots, mostly peaceful but fiery protests, those, but not for anything else. If you tried anything else, you'd be shut down because, it's a health emergency. It's amazing how the health emergency goes away once you're protesting for a left-wing cause. So, did you have the right to bear arms? Because, the Second Amendment, big for the Republicans. No, you could not unless you were pro-regime. They had the Weapons Act of 1938, where the law replaced the earlier Weimar's Republic's gun laws. While it did simplify some aspects of gun ownership for loyal German citizens, it simultaneously tightened restrictions on those deemed undesirable by the regime, including Jews, political dissidents, and others. The Jews were explicitly targeted for disarmament. In 1938, after the enactment of the Weapons Act, Jews were forbidden from owning firearms or even edged weapons like knives. Aren't they talking about banning knives from the local populace in Britain right now? Of course, they already banned guns because, can't be allowed to defend yourself. It's not like the criminals actually obey these laws, but if you ban them, then law-abiding citizens can't have them too, at which point only the criminals have them, and then you are, a little sacrificial lamb. So, this was part of a broader strategy to render certain groups defenseless. The process of acquiring weapons was heavily regulated. Owners needed to prove their trustworthiness to the state, which included political loyalty checks. This meant that only those who were in favor, or at least not against the regime, were likely to be granted permission to own weapons. Even for those who allowed to own guns, these types of weapons permitted were limited to sporting or hunting firearms. Military-style weapons were strictly controlled, and the concept of an armed citizenry as a check against tyranny was antithetical to Nazi governance. I wonder, who does this resemble? Clearly the right. Of course it's the right. Not. And also, I asked, did they enact socialist policies in healthcare, education, and the economy? And the answer was basically yes, but they used different reasons for it, so it doesn't count, which I find asinine. So they did have the public health programs. They expanded public health measures, focusing on improving the health of the Aryan race. Obviously, they were racist. Nobody is saying that's a good thing. Nobody today is saying let's do it. This is just saying, well, yes, they were socialist, but they were also racist, therefore they're right-wing. No. If you listen to what Trump says or what the AfD says in Germany, they're literally saying, just close the borders and kick out those who are here illegally, just enforce the laws that were on the books for decades, and then treat citizens as equal regardless of race. They don't discriminate based on race. The ones discriminating based on race on everything, including getting your healthcare, incidentally, are the Democrats. We have had white people being last in line during the public health emergency, the 19. We have had that happen, and blacks and such getting preference under the Democrats. Nobody on the right ever said put white people in front of the line. Show me who, where, when. Show me. I will oppose them completely. This is so stupid. So they say that this included extensive public health campaigns, like the Strength Through Joy for Worker Health and Fitness, but they were part of eugenics and racial purity policies rather than socialist healthcare. Incidentally, eugenics. I wonder, who's eugenicist right now? Could it be the left with their MAID programs, where basically it's assisted dying for people that basically the state decides shouldn't exist because they are at all on the state. For example, you've had veterans that needed a wheelchair or surgery, and they were offered MAID instead, heavily pushed towards it in Canada. And it's become quite a high-ranking cause of death in that country. And of course, the Democrats want to bring it to the United States, and also the Labour promised to bring it to the UK if they haven't already. So I wonder who this resembles. The euthanasia program, the infamous T4 program, where disabled individuals were systematically murdered, was a perversion of healthcare policy, showcasing their application of social welfare through the lens of racial hygiene rather than humanitarian socialism. Humanitarian socialism is killing quite enough people in Canada right now, thanks. And of course, you had education, heavily state-controlled. Who wants to abolish state control over education? Oh, that's right, Donald Trump. Clearly, he is a fan of the Austrian painter. They had curricula designed to indoctrinate youth with their ideology. Now, I wonder, how many TikTok videos did you see of teachers saying that they're going to indoctrinate the kids to be nationalists for America? Because I haven't seen any. I have seen a lot of the rainbow crowd, saying that they indoctrinate the kids to be leftists, to be woke, to be rainbow crowd themselves. There's tons of them all over the internet. There's compilations with dozens. This included physical education to prepare for military service, integration of racial science into all levels of education. Incidentally, you do get, for example, today, the racial science in all levels of education from the left. Like, for example, in a math question, instead of asking you, like, a train is coming and then there's the other train, what's the difference between the speeds or something, they will just give you a question like, you have two people, one is white, one is black, the white person gets 60 or 70% of the share of something, and the black gets the rest. Now, how much did each get? Like, they would literally introduce the idea that the state is racist and blacks are oppressed and whites are evil into every level of education. Right now, that's what they're doing. So, okay. While education was accessible and free, its purpose was to serve the state's ideological goals. Who wants to make education free? They also had youth organizations. The economy also had state control, a form of state capitalism, where they controlled key sectors of the economy for war preparation and self-sufficiency. This included nationalization of industries critical to their war efforts, but not with the intent of distributing wealth or power to the working class. Has anyone ever distributed wealth and power to the working class? No. So if the result is basically the same as socialism, but they just use different words, I'm gonna call it socialism anyway, thanks. They also had labor policies, with German Labor Front replacing trade unions, controlling all aspects of workers' lives, including wages, working conditions, and leisure activities. Now, who wants to control your leisure activities, I wonder? Who uses state funds to tell developers of movies, comics, books, and games what they can and can't create? Who's using state money to propagandize everyone into accepting the type of leisure activities that they specifically agree with and ban all others? And of course, they had social programs like unemployment benefits and public works, which were expended. But these were more about ensuring economic stability than about socialist redistribution. Again, they use different words, therefore they're not like us. Literally, the one similarity between the right today and the 1930s German is that they are nationalists. And basically, every single regime in the history of humanity, bar the modern lefts today in the last like 30-40 years, has been nationalist. So that's about as effective in curtailing the wheat from the chaff here, the fans of the Austrian painters from those who aren't, as saying that, well, the guy drank water and breathed air, therefore anyone who does the same is also a fan of his. It makes zero sense. Also, if you remember, they had quite a few environmental policies during the whole romanticization of the nature and the environment thing that they had going on there. So, all in all, I'd say that on pretty much everything, the left is far closer to these, historically evil people that she was talking about, right? met with the head of a political party that has far-right views and historic ties to extreme groups. The ones with historic ties to extreme groups are you and your friends, lefties, not us. Stop trying to have this historical revisionism to try and dump on us the results of your awful ideas. It was the same in China, it was the same in Russia. Socialism bad. That's what history tells us. And so long as you can't just abandon the idea of concentrating all power within the state and banning all opposition, which I can understand why you are attracted to it. It gives you a lot of power and wealth, but it also destroys the country and eventually brings the downfall of your regime when people can't bear it anymore. Suppose that's why you want to literally everything be virtual and on the cloud and controlled by AI and robots and drones. Because at that point, it would be impossible to topple your dystopic tyranny, and then you'd win forever. Which is exactly what channels that talk about these things from a right-wing perspective, of course, most of them that are effective are much bigger than mine, but still, are trying to prevent. So we're trying to push back on this, we're trying to warn the public to say, pay attention, they're doing it again. Last time, tens of millions of people were gone due to what they did. They're preparing all over again to try the same stuff. They, once again, have noble-sounding reasons for it. This time, it's not in order to save the country from the scourge of the parasitic Jews. This time, it's to save the country from the scourge of the racist white man. I promise, this time we'll definitely get to utopia. No, I don't want to believe in any utopianism at all. I do believe in the existence of the greatest evil, which is, incidentally, socialism and its offshoots. Marxism, socialism, wokeness, globalism, they all stem from the same ideas and they are all infinitely evil. Basically, stop them at any cost. That's what I believe. Other than that, if you want to say, well, the state should have large social programs, I disagree with you, but that alone is not going to make you a socialist, it's not going to make you a despotic tyrant. It's not dangerous. You can hold your own opinion. You can be for or against religion. Incidentally, the Germans, the 1930s, yeah, they were against it. They basically forced everybody to either make their ideas, like hating Jews, part of the Christian faith, or else you were hunted. A lot of them were exiled, a lot of them were killed. Anyway, you can have your own opinions about the economy, you can have your own opinions about morality, you can have your own opinions about pretty much everything. So long as you're not a socialist of any sort, then we're going to have no problems. I'm not going to tell you how to live. Just don't be a far-left crazy lunatic. Apparently, that's too difficult for basically all of the mainstream left today, which is why everybody's abandoning them. Which is why they lost all of the quality people on their side, and they're stuck with Kamala Harris and Hillary Clinton and Dick Cheney. Good luck. So far, it doesn't seem to be working out. Thanks for watching, like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you next time.